You are watching Liberty Online TV.
This is Liberty Online TV powered by Orange Sierra Leone. Orange.
Good morning, viewers, and welcome to a brand new edition of the Breakfast Show, where they come to you live from Liberty Online TV, with the stream on Facebook, YouTube, and also on our website, we're at www.libertyonlinetv.com, and that one day they powered by Orange Sierra Leone. Today is Monday, and this is the very first edition of the Breakfast Show for this week. And where they bring and come to you, Mina Khadija Bangura.
And Mina Mabel Kaba. Good morning. Today is Monday, the 24th day of March, 2025. And inside this edition of the Breakfast Show, as you all know, Liberty Online TV, we position ourselves in this digital space for ensure say we bring come accurate news reports them to una all them. We make today with the look at the bilateral relation where Salon gets with the United States, especially it's them where a lot of misconception and misinformation don't go around regarding immigration policies them where the Trump administration they plan for implement. Well, how them policies here so they affect Salon? Waiting at the current status of Sierra Leoneans them within at the US. All of that we go discuss in this edition of the program.
Well, this and plenty other issues them, not forget, say, immediately after the June 24, 2023 elections, where the All People's Congress, APC party said they don't agree with the elections results. We see the position where the U.S. government's been take, who said they been support with couple for set up the tripartite committee. They've been there at the center of all the negotiation there, so, and now the negotiation and done, government and the opposition, they try for implement some of the recommendation them. Waiting the U.S. government they do for ensure that they adhere to the recommendation them and how they don't they forget the implementation process. All of that you go know inside the program. Well, in case you get question on any of the issues them, especially when come by the bilateral relationship between the U.S. government and that of the Salon government, issues and rumors then we don't they come this BNT about deportation of Sierra Leonean them, when illegal immigrants them at the U.S. All of that you go know inside the program this morning. Send me your question na the comment section, or you can as well text we na the number +23 274 200 545. Well, for can help we get in conversation na this morning na the studio, na a pleasure for welcome for the very first time na Liberty TV the U.S. Ambassador to Salon, when Ambassador Bryan Hunt. Good morning, Mr. Ambassador.
Good morning. It's a great pleasure to be here with you on Liberty TV Online this morning.
It's a pleasure having you here this morning.
Thank you.
All right, that's the U.S. Ambassador to Salon, Ambassador Bryan Hunt, where they between at the studio this morning, or they can talk about the bilateral relationship where the U.S. gets with Salon and some other plenty issues them where be done they cause rumor and misinformation, especially on the social media.
All right, so we continue with the Breakfast Show, but before we can talk to Ambassador, let me just get quick updates from courts. Osai Magistrate Sakekura na the Freetown Magistrate Court number 1 don't send one Santigi Camara winner OSD officer go na the male correctional center because police allege say he been killing Bogoda na Waterloo this PNTM. Let we join Mariatu Sharif as Eagle reports.
135-year-old Santigi Camara winner OSD don't make another appearance before Magistrate Sakekura na the Freetown Magistrate Court number 1 for where police allege say he been killed in brother. The accused Santigi Camara detained before the court on one count charge we get to do with murder, contrary to Section 1 of the Offences Against the Persons Act of 1861. According to the particulars of offence, na that January 19 this year na Waterloo, na the Western Rural District, the accused been killed in brother Francis Amara Kane. When the court been read this charge to the accused, the magistrate not been take any plea from him. Where he testify before the court but waiting about this case. The number 3rd witness, Sergeant 8576 Issa Kamara, wait up na Grafton Barracks and attacked na the CID department headquarters na Freetown. He been recognize the accused and say A member February for this year, he been there on duty where one inspector for the B, where attack na the homicide syndicate na the criminal investigation department headquarter, be hand over Giam 2 old rubber chair where get blood stained panam, 1 AK-47, 2 empty bullets, 1 old empty magazine, 4 live rounds, and 1 used bullet. The court will record the item here as exhibits. And since then, the item has to be done in a police custody. Magistrate Sake Kurano been agreed for give bail to the accused and be sent them go back to the male correctional center and be adjourned this case to March 27 this year. For Liberty Online TV, me na Maria to Sheriff.
Well, from that court report today, we come back na studio. Earlier, we introduced to studio guest, we na Ambassador Bryan Hunt, we na the U.S. Ambassador to Salon, and today na the program where they can look at everything we get for do with the bilateral relationship where the U.S. government be get with Salon, and plenty other issues them. In case you say for the watchery, you get question for the ambassador, send them through the number +232 74 545, or you can as well text we na the comment section na any of the platform them where you dey watch we. As you all know, Liberty TV na the only digital platform also they get credible and accurate information them but several things that way they happen at the country. Coming back to you, Mr. Ambassador, welcome again, and it's a pleasure hosting you at this morning for the very first time. We feel elated as a media institution having the U.S. Ambassador with us this morning.
Well, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to join you all for the first time here on Liberty TV Online, and I look forward to the conversation.
Okay. Let's, of course, you're here to talk about everything bilateral relationship with the U.S. government and that of the Sierra Leone government. It's not a secret that there were some issues immediately after the June 24th, 2023 elections in terms of strengthening the bilateral relationship. A lot has been happening behind the scene, holding negotiation, conversation, just to ensure that the government and that of the opposition continue to work together as a way of strengthening Sierra Leone democracy. As we speak now, how do you describe the bilateral relationship between the U.S. government and that of the Sierra Leone government?
I think it's a very strong one. We've worked very hard with the government and with the opposition to try to lay a solid foundation for the relationship going forward. The new Trump-Vance administration in Washington feels very strongly that we have to change our relationship, not just with Sierra Leone, but with most African countries, and move away from a relationship that is wholly defined by the foreign assistance that we provide to Africa. Their view is that, yes, foreign assistance can and should be an important part of a relationship, but it should not be the primary motivation in any bilateral relationship. So what we hope to do over the coming years is to build on the foundation we've laid to establish a new relationship that's built on trade, that's built on investment, that's built upon a shared perspective as to how we approach global issues, and really try to move the relationship forward towards a modern one that is appropriate between co-equal sovereign states.
Democracy is a big thing for the United States, and we saw immediately after the June 2023 elections, there was a visa restriction policy that was implemented for those who the United States thought were responsible for attempting to distort the democracy in Sierra Leone. How has that been implemented so far since 2023 to now?
So those visa restrictions are still in place. We do not discuss specific individuals because visa records under our law are private. But there are individuals who, if they meet that criteria and were to apply for a U.S. visa, would be denied that visa. We believe very strongly that Sierra Leone needs to continue to move forward on its democratic journey as it defines it. It should not be a journey that's dictated by the United States or any other country. But to the extent we can support that journey, to the extent we can work with the government and the opposition to implement what they themselves have agreed to in the Agreement for National Unity and the Tripartite Committee's report, we're certainly happy to do that using our diplomatic good offices and other forms of support.
Is there any time frame for this visa restriction for these individuals? You don't want to discuss details or their names. Is there any time frame that the U.S. Embassy will consider at any point to lift these restrictions?
So under the provision of law that was used by the Secretary at the time, those restrictions remain in place until and unless a future Secretary of State were to decide to lift them.
So are these just top government officials, or it is?
So again, I can't talk to the specifics or anything that would discuss identities of those that were listed, but the criteria that was laid out in the order that was signed by the former Secretary of State says very clearly that this applies to individuals who we believe played a prominent role in disrupting the elections here in Sierra Leone.
The 2023 elections left a dent on Sierra Leone's democracy, especially when we are talking about transparency in elections, the rule of law, good governance, and a whole lot of issues. And the U.S. government, under your leadership, you've been on the forefront in all of these negotiations. You even provided some financial assistance to set up the tripartite committee that looked into some of these issues that occurred during the 2023 election to prevent some of these issues not to happen again in future elections. They've finished the work of the tripartite committee, they made the reports, they handed it over to the international partners and that of His Excellency the President. Now it's time for implementation of these recommendations. Where are these recommendations now in terms of implementing it? How honest and open both parties, the government and the opposition, are they willing to implement some of these recommendations?
So, picking up where you left off after the presentation to the President, the Chief Minister took a paper to Cabinet in which he recommended that the government implement all of the recommendations contained in the tripartite report. That was adopted by the Cabinet, so that is now Cabinet policy that they will move forward to implement all of the joint and shared recommendations that are in that report. They also agreed to set up a steering committee. That steering committee is charged with making sure that the legislative, regulatory, and other changes contained in the tripartite report are implemented. The committee is chaired by the Chief Minister. It includes representation from a number of government ministries, as well as both sides in the Parliament, several local government elected officials, as well as civil society organizations to try to drive the process forward. They just met, in fact, a day ago, so the Chief Minister provided an update in his online journal at that time in which he noted that they are moving ahead with the legislative packages that need to go before Parliament that will change the electoral law and several other pieces of legislation as recommended by the tripartite. He noted that the regulations that the electoral management bodies are working on are in train, and those are being reviewed by the steering committee. And he noted that the external functional management review of the Election Commission of Sierra Leone is largely completed, and they are now awaiting the final report that should be out shortly. So I think we're making solid progress. The recommendations the tripartite committee had were not ones that were ever going to be implemented overnight. They are things that require a deliberative legislative and regulatory process. And that's the process that your government is now going through with support from the international community.
Even though the recommendations are not going to be implemented overnight, we saw just after delivering the report to the President, the opposition, which is a key party in all of these, up to this time, they still have disagreement within themselves as to the final report that was presented to the President. Is the United States convinced that the outcome of that tripartite will really address the concerns of the opposition, taking into consideration the disagreements they have within themselves now?
So I'll say two things on that. First, the purpose has never been to make every politician in Sierra Leone happy. The purpose of the tripartite has always been to make sure that you have an electoral system that is credible internationally and domestically. Having smartly engaged a number of global experts in the tripartite process, I think your government and the opposition members of the committee are quite confident, as is the international community, that if all of the recommendations are implemented, you will have that global and domestic credibility within your electoral system, and the problems you had in 2023 will not reoccur in 2028 or any subsequent election. So we're very confident there. The All People's Congress, of course, is a broad party, as we hope all political parties are. And there are disagreements within that party, as there are in political parties globally. They also have a process to work through those differences, a national executive committee that reviews and sets policy for the party. The NAC has met, they have reviewed this, and the NAC is firmly committed to working with the government to implement these recommendations and move the process forward.
About 3 weeks ago, we hosted the Secretary General of the All People's Congress, APC party, and he expressed some concern about the way the government went about selecting people that should be in the committee to implement some of these recommendations. According to him, they were not properly consulted in terms of selecting members to represent the opposition in the committee that would be charged with the responsibility to implement some of these recommendations. He even went further and said they've expressed the same concern to the U.S. Embassy. Are you aware of these concerns?
So Secretary General Doumbouya has been very open about the concerns the opposition has on the process as a whole. I think that's appropriate. I would hope that he continues to express those and that other members of their national executive continue to make concerns known so that they can be discussed and addressed within the process. Everything that happens within a negotiation between government and opposition is going to be a compromise. And both sides are sometimes going to get everything they want, sometimes they're not going to get what they want, sometimes it'll end up in the middle. And I think the more we can push things towards common agreement, the better. So I would say the Secretary General certainly has valid concerns. I hope everyone hears his concerns and takes them on board. But we have to ultimately come to a compromise that drives things forward. And I think we have that legitimate compromise. There are members of the opposition, as well as members who are affiliated with neither political party, sitting on the committee. I think it does represent a broad cross-section of Sierra Leonean society. And most importantly, the committee decided in its first meeting that it will take all decisions unanimously. So there's not going to be a voting process.
So what role is the U.S. Embassy playing in ensuring that you address some of these legitimate concerns you just mentioned that the Secretary General have been expressing?
So we talk to both sides on an ongoing basis. We use our good offices to try to facilitate dialogue between the two of them. We offer ideas, we offer technical support. We do not try to impose a solution on either party. This really is an APC government negotiation, an APC government-driven process, and they're the ones who have to make the compromises. Our role is as facilitator, presenter of good ideas, someone who can help to make that dialogue happen between the two sides. But we don't come in and tell them, you must do this, you must do that.
But in your position as a negotiator and also facilitating this whole process, is there any sign of commitment from both parties that they really want to make this work?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Both sides have been very clear in private and in public statements that they recognize how important this is for the country. I think both sides are frustrated with the electoral system as it currently is. Both sides over the years have benefited and been harmed by the current electoral system. They're very tired of having elections happen and then spending years in court trying to adjudicate the outcome of those elections. Both of them recognize that it would be far better if we could have a decision by the Sierra Leonean people on the day, a definitive end, and then whichever side wins is able to govern free from the shadow of court cases and ongoing protests and ongoing discussions about elections. So there's strong motivation for both sides to want to participate in this process. The fact that we've gone as far as we have, a signed agreement, then a joint recommendation with the tripartite endorsement of that, everyone participating in the steering committee, I think it shows that while there are definitely going to be differences, and they're going to continue to complain about one another, I think the fact is that both government and opposition are moving the ball forward in a way that benefits the people of Sierra Leone.
Aside the issues that we are discussing now that has to do with the way how the government went ahead to select members of the APC that should be in a committee to implement the recommendations of the tripartite committee, there is also another issue, the APC, they've been talking about, the one that has to do with implementing Resolution 4 in the Agreement for Peace and Unity. There's this list, according to the Secretary General, they submitted through the Chief Minister's office. And these are names of people the APC thought that they're in the prisons or the correctional centers because of politically motivated cases. There's a list of about 75 the APC submitted to government, and the government went around to check in several correctional centers. They said they only saw 13 people that are part of this list, and this is a concern the APC has been talking about. What role is the U.S. Embassy playing in ensuring that the implementation of Resolution 4 in the Agreement for Peace and Unity go on smoothly?
So I think the first thing to remember is that the agreement never laid out a process by which Resolution 4 would be implemented. So since the signing of the agreement in 2023, we and other partners have been working very closely with government and opposition to create that process out of whole cloth. The reality is the first list that the opposition presented to the government was a compilation of everything and everyone, and some of it was election related, some of them weren't, some were not in prison, many escaped in November. So that initial list of, I think it was over 300 actually, was not terribly useful for the process. So as we talked through with both sides and established a way forward, it was agreed the opposition would work with a non-governmental organization to gather a more streamlined, more accurate list that the government could work from, and they would submit individual cases for review. At this point, they submitted an initial group of 12. 10 of those have now been released, which I think is tremendous progress given how hard everyone has worked on this. There is another list that has been submitted of, I think it's another 7 or 10 cases, which are now pending before the committee for review. We hope that those will move expeditiously forward now that we have a model for doing it. And if there are other cases that are out there that the opposition wishes to file for review by the committee, there is now a process that they can follow in order to do that. So I think we've made tremendous progress from a very general statement of policy to actually seeing the first group of detainees released.
Let's talk about the foreign aid to African countries, and we all know Sierra Leone has been a great beneficiary from all these aids coming from the U.S. in terms of health, in terms of clean drinking water, the energy. We all heard about the MCC, the eligibility of Sierra Leone on the MCC compact. What is the status of all of these aids now, considering the suspension by President Trump of all foreign aids to African countries?
So I think it's important to understand where we actually are in the U.S. political process. When the president came into office, he decided we needed to take a comprehensive review of all of our foreign assistance across the board. As part of that review, and as other administrations have done before him, he decided that we were going to take a pause in our foreign assistance programming so that we could conduct that review and we could make sure that every dollar that we're spending is consistent with our foreign policy, consistent with the administration priorities, and is being used effectively to the benefit of those we want the foreign assistance to reach. So we have done that, and we've started the initial reviews. Some programs have already been approved to continue. For Sierra Leone, that includes some of our very largest assistance programs in HIV/AIDS, in combating malaria, in maternal and child health, in working to prevent global pandemic disease.
These programs are not affected.
Those programs are going forward. They've already been approved to continue. They've been granted the necessary review, so we have people on the ground once again implementing those programs, which is by far the largest piece of the USAID portfolio. There are some areas where the president decided we will not be moving forward. Family planning, climate change, things that he found were not consistent with his administration priorities. We also looked very hard at our implementing mechanisms for everything that we're doing, and we realized that we have a lot of them. In some cases, we have 5, 6, 7, 8 implementing mechanisms for a single program. That increases overhead costs. It decreases the amount of money that actually reaches beneficiaries. So in some cases, we've decided, okay, we're only going to use 2 implementing mechanisms going forward, or 1 implementing mechanism going forward, rather than 8 or 10 implementing mechanisms, which means more money will ultimately get to the people who need it in Sierra Leone. On the Millennium Challenge Corporation project, that project is subject to a compact between the United States and Sierra Leone. That compact's an international agreement. There are provisions whereby either side could at some point decide to withdraw from that compact, but neither the United States nor Sierra Leone has started any withdrawal process. So at this point, the compact remains in place, and we anticipate moving forward with the program.
These words of assurance, should Sierra Leonean be hopeful for an implementation of the compact between the U.S. government and that of the Sierra Leone government?
Well, I'm certainly hopeful, so I would encourage others to be.
Even though there has not been any specific statements regarding that, whether it's going to continue, but as it is what it is since the last conversation we had about the compact. But has there been any conversation around that since the Trump administration took over?
Oh, sure, we talk about the compact all the time with the government implementing partners here to make sure that we're moving forward with the steps that are necessary for that compact to enter into force. As most folks will know, MCC is not the sort of program where you sign today and it starts construction tomorrow. You sign the compact today, and then we will probably spend 18 to 24 months in a pre-implementation phase, making sure all of the engineering design is done, all of the contracting is done, all of the relevant bodies are established, and all of the entry into force conditions are met. And once we reach that point, then we will enter the compact into force, and we will move forward with construction work.
So at this stage, the pre-visibility study and every other background work is ongoing as we speak?
So at this point, we are in the pre-implementation phase. There are various things that are ongoing relating to the compact. There are some things that have not started yet because we're not at that point. But as of right now, the compact is in force, and we are going to proceed as normal.
All right, Mr. Ambassador, continue to be with us in the studio. We'll join you shortly. In case you just tune in, you do watch the breakfast show where they come to you live from Liberty Online TV, where they stream na Facebook, YouTube, and also na our website on www.libertyonlinetv.com, and that's na Orange Sierra Leone, they powered Liberty Online TV, their website. We deal with Ambassador Bryan Hunt, so they look at the bilateral relationship between the U.S. government and that of Salon. So in case you watch, you get question or you need anything where you want the ambassador for clarify, send them through the comment section. We'll go read on our messages them later on inside the program, or you can as well text me on the number +23 274 200 545. The ambassador there with we this morning, he go respond to all on our messages them later on at some point. Don't forget to share the program so that more people go be part of this very interesting conversation what they get with Bryan Hunt at the studio this morning.
All right, we'll continue with the show, and quickly they look at one other issue. Also, some people where they collect dirty under the Congo Cross Bridge. Don't say now from them dirty where then they gather, then they able forget then living. Well, let me just watch as the team bingo wakade Osai Mary Jane Sise bin get for talk to them people here. Let we see what they say.
Waste management, now one thing this way plenty people don't advocate for, as way for say we able for manage we waste them na the country. This being them, we don't they see young man them na different community, don't they use different waste them as means for survive. And this not different from young people them wait up under the Congo Cross Bridge. They explain about how then they use the dirty as business.
Get a plastic or rubber for us. Now they survive for the day. And they do clean salon back. Some of them go out the dirty. They go out there, they pick the plastic, the rubber there, the iron there. They don't go sell it. So they might not sell.
Well, little here, where some Saturday in the world they pick over they will survive. They will get iron, them after gas there, they keep them plastic. They will get to survive in the long also.
Alicia's camera, now one party people them where they part of this business, they talk about the support where they need.
We don't encourage anybody with the Kenya because we are so we need that. But come on, now most of you get skill. Yes, so we're not going to good person to help you. Society they laugh because they think that students have the slots. So all is lost for you, but we're not for saying with God, all things are lost. So see so many embarrassments for the dots here. So we do our big, although no say not so compulsory. We need help because the challenges are beaucoup. So we need help. We say help comment. I show so let me go there. Let me call you there. We will find what we can for you. But attach yourself.
Alicia's camera end up say then they do this for ensure say the country gets a proper waste managed system. For Liberty Online TV, me na Mary Agency Kasise the report.
All right, we continue the breakfast show where they come to you live from Liberty Online TV. We still have in our midst the ambassador, Bryan Hunt. Today we are looking at different bilateral relationship between the U.S. government and that of Sierra Leone. Earlier we spoke lengthily about the tripartite committee, the implementation of the recommendations. Let's now look at another topical issue. Sometime back, I think last week, there was this publication from the New York Times list of countries that President Trump is considering for visa ban, and most local newspapers published through their digital platform that the foreign minister, Honorable Timothy Kaba, summoned you for a meeting to have conversation around these visa ban or restrictions from the list of countries that was published by the New York Times. How true is this?
So, in terms of the actual state of affairs, I think it's important to be clear with the viewers. There is no visa ban. Visa operations continue as normal for Sierra Leoneans, both here and globally. Everyone who has a visa is free to use it to travel in accordance with the terms of that visa to the United States. President Trump did ask the State Department and our colleagues at the Department of Homeland Security when he took office to look at the entirety of our visa system globally to make sure that we have, one, a secure system, and that, two, it is in no way contributing to illegal immigration to the United States. That deliberative process has started. That deliberative process is ongoing. It will still take some time before any decisions are made. Right now, there are no formal proposals that have gone forward. It is a deliberative process, and in the course of a deliberative process in the United States, we encourage lots of ideas to be put forward and flushed out. So what the New York Times and Reuters, they both published different lists of countries. What they have published is not official policy of the U.S. government. It is not something that is in front of President Trump right now for decision, and it does not reflect the final outcome of the process.
Information, Mr. Ambassador.
So I would say the New York Times and Reuters obviously have their sources, but it is absolutely not something that has been proposed as policy. It is not something that has been signed out as policy at this time.
So even though you're stressing the fact that it has not been official for a visa ban for Sierra Leone or any country that has been approved, but there is also this rumor that is largely being spread on the internet regarding, let's take for example, citizens of Sierra Leone who are residing in the United States but are not properly documented. They say they are hunting them as we talk currently. Is that true?
Oh, I think it's very true. The crystal clear that his administration's policy is to remove every illegal immigrant living in the United States. So if individuals are in the United States, then do not have legitimate, valid visas or paperwork to be there, they are subject to deportation. And ultimately, our Department of Homeland Security has been charged by the president with working towards deportation of every illegal immigrant in the United States.
Have you received any correspondence from the Department of Homeland Office in the U.S. in terms of Sierra Leone, maybe a list of Sierra Leoneans that should be deported?
If only it were that simple. Unfortunately, we have a free and open system in the United States, so we don't track every movement of every person who goes into the United States. So there is no list that our Department of Homeland Security has that says these 1,000 or 1,500 Sierra Leoneans are living illegally in the United States. As they encounter Sierra Leoneans in the course of their immigration operations who are living illegally in the United States, they do work to return them to Sierra Leone. And we have had people who have final orders of deportation, who are Sierra Leonean citizens, who have been sent back or in the process of being sent back to your country.
There's also this growing concern by the United States of those who overstay their visas. What's the current situation around that?
So we have a very serious problem with Sierra Leoneans misusing their visas. About 15% of those who are traveling on tourist or business visas overstay or misuse their visas. About 35% of students overstay or misuse their visas. That can't continue to happen. If those rates remain as high as they currently are, we are going to have to take a serious look at how our visa policy is implemented towards Sierra Leone.
What could be the possible measures?
Well, I don't want to speculate as to what the Secretary or the President might decide to do, but certainly we are going to need to take action to make sure that those overstay rates go down. Frankly, it would be best if Sierra Leoneans were to simply adhere to the conditions of the visas that they are granted.
Is it true that there's been a drastic reduction in the number of visas issued to Sierra Leonean?
So the refusal rate has gone up slightly, in large part because we have these serious overstay rates. I would not call it dramatic. It's certainly not what some people have suggested in their social media commentary, but the rate has gone up slightly because of the very serious overstay problems that we have.
And some people, for example, individuals, U.S. Immigrants that have proper documentation, if they want to maybe file for their relative and they have concern that the procedure is a bit stiff now for Sierra Leoneans to acquire visa to move to the United States.
So for immigrant visas, the process hasn't changed, and the refusal rates haven't changed, and the waiting time has not changed. This is merely a perception that people have. People want, when they file immigrant visas for relatives, to see those visas turned around in a week or a month. That has never happened. It probably will never happen. The reality is it takes probably about a year for an immigrant visa from the time it is filed to the time it is issued on average. And that's assuming people do everything they're supposed to do in terms of filing the paperwork, getting the medical exams, working with the National Visa Center to complete the package. So it is a lengthy process. It's always been a lengthy process. And because of how our immigration laws work, it probably always will be a lengthy process.
You just confirm about the slight increased rates of refusal of visas for those who want to go to the United States from Sierra Leone based on those that have overstayed their stay in the United States. Is there any plan to review this increase?
So no, we think the increase is appropriate given the number of Sierra Leoneans that are there. What our consular section does is they conduct interviews with those who have overstayed. They look at the profile of those individuals. They glean data about why those individuals overstayed, what were the common characteristics, and then they adjust their adjudications and decisions accordingly based on the data. So if we know, for example, that there is a very high risk of young men between the ages of 18 and 25 who are not employed overstaying their visas, then they are going to take a much closer look at any individual that meets those criteria.
Quite recently, there's been this public outcry, especially for government officials, including certain individuals into government delegation to travel to the US, maybe to attend conferences, summit, and what have you. And there's this huge concern from Sierra Leoneans, especially those paying monies to these government officials to be included in overseas trips, especially trips that has to do with the US. Is the U.S. Embassy concerned here in all of these scandals around government officials?
So we are always concerned when we are adjudicating official or diplomatic visas to make sure that the person who is going meets the U.S. criteria for issuance of those visas. That means the individual, one, has to be employed by the government of Sierra Leone in order to qualify for an official or diplomatic visa. And two, the individual has to be traveling for a legitimately governmental purpose. So the fact that you have a diplomatic passport but are going to Disney World is not going to get you a diplomatic visa. So it's for us, it's very important that we make sure that's the case. We do everything that we need to do internally to validate, working with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and other ministries, that the individuals traveling are in fact government employees and are traveling for a governmental purpose. And sometimes that means we have to interview the individuals. Many times it means we can issue on the basis of simply working with the individual ministries. But we always try to do as much due diligence as possible before issuing those sorts of visas.
Still on the issue of those that have overstayed already, is the embassy in any communication with the Foreign Affairs Ministry, for example, to ensure that they bring those people back?
Oh yes, we talk to the Foreign Affairs Ministry, we talk to the Interior Ministry, we talk to your Immigration Department on a regular basis about individuals who are about to be returned to Sierra Leone because they're subject to final orders of deportation. In some cases, your ministry will need to issue travel documents for them because their passports have long expired, and we have an ongoing dialogue with them to make sure that that gets done in accordance with the standards that are laid out by the International Civil Aviation Organization.
All right, let's look at a few comments that our viewers are sending, so you'll be able to have ample time to respond to some of these comments. Kamara Suleiman is saying, what is the U.S. position right now about the election results? Because Samura is still calling out for electoral justice. Is the 2023 election issue didn't settle yet, or does the international community work on giving the right to whom it is due? Or does the tripartite seal the issues surrounding the 2023 elections?
All right, this one from the YouTube channel, Abdullah Lukele is asking, Ambassador Hunt, if you had to assess Sierra Leone's democratic system, what percentage score would you give?
Aluz Conte is saying, are there any due diligence process for applicants who requires B1, B2 visas?
And Kamara says, could the ambassador please confirm whether the U.S. is a guarantor for the successful implementation of the tripartite agreement between the IPC and government? If so, is there any timeline for the implementation before the end of this parliament?
All right, let's just take them in bits,
Yeah.
so you'll be able to respond to them accordingly. I think we just took 4 of them.
Yes. So on the question of the U.S. stance towards the 2023 elections, our stance has not changed. We issued our statement immediately after the elections. We expressed concern about the conduct and the announced outcome and whether or not it accorded with what the people of Sierra Leone had actually voted. So our views on the conduct of those elections have not changed. What has changed is that it's not for the United States to determine who's going to be the government of Sierra Leone. We expressed our concerns. The Election Commission went forward and declared a winner. The opposition chose not to contest that election in court. Therefore, the outcome of the elections are what the Election Commission of Sierra Leone...
They had their reasons because by then, according to the opposition, they've lost the trust and confidence on the Sierra Leone's judiciary. Was that reason enough for them to boycott the courts by then?
Well, that's really a question for the opposition as to whether that was the right strategy or not. I'm not going to get into whether their political strategy was good or bad. What I can say is that under Sierra Leonean law, there is one way to overturn an election result, and that is by going to the courts and demonstrating that it was invalid and filing your petition within a certain period of time. The opposition chose not to do that, which means that those election results stand under Sierra Leonean law as valid. The United States does not get involved in validating or invalidating election results. That's not our role. We work with the government that is duly in power in the country. As far as the whole question of, and then what? The opposition decided they were going to go into mediation with the government. They signed the Agreement for National Unity. That is the controlling document in terms of the ongoing discussions between the opposition and government. That and the resulting tripartite recommendations are what the United States and the international community are focused on trying to help the government and opposition implement. That was a choice Sierra Leoneans made. It was a choice that the opposition made. That was how they elected to proceed. So for the international community, it is only appropriate that that is what we continue to focus our efforts around. As far as a percentage score on your democracy, I don't get into those sorts of scoring exercises. It can become very, very difficult. What I would say is that if you're interested to see how Sierra Leone ranks internationally, I would look at things like the Freedom House Index, which is an internationally recognized measure. There are others out there that are done by the World Bank and other organizations. But we as the U.S. government don't get into ranking democracies or scoring them. It would be somewhat presumptuous of us to do that. And the real question which people should be asking is, does Sierra Leone's democracy work and deliver for Sierra Leoneans? And if I were a Sierra Leonean citizen, that is the measure I would be most concerned with, irrespective of what international groups or outsiders may choose to say about my democracy. It's a question of, does my democracy deliver for me? Is it delivering services? Does it give me the opportunity to have my voice heard? Does it allow me to express myself freely? Does it guarantee my human rights? On the question of B1, B2 diligence, absolutely. We take B1, B2 or tourist and business visas very seriously. That's one of the areas we have a very high overstay rate among Sierra Leoneans on. So our consular officers are charged by law with assuming that everyone who walks in and requests one of those visas intends to immigrate to the United States.
Has there been any change in the policies?
No change in the policies. The law has been consistent since the 1980s, so the standards have been consistent since then. What changes is that Sierra Leoneans change their travel patterns. Those who overstay change. The profiles change. So we continue to adjust our visa adjudication with the aim of making sure that legitimate travelers can go, but those who are going to misuse their visas are never issued a visa in the first place.
With these 15% now that you have, based on the data or statistics you just gave earlier, is the embassy considering a change in the process or procedures in acquiring these tourist visas?
So we will continue to adjust adjudication standards. We will continue to look more closely at those categories of individuals who have a history of overstaying in the United States. That may change, but the legal standards that we apply are written by the Congress in law. They're enshrined in the INA. So unless Congress were to issue new legislation, we would not change the overall legal standards for adjudication.
Let's look at the area of collaboration. Earlier you alluded that nothing changed. The programs that were on track, they are still on track despite some of the suspensions of the U.S. aid to African countries and countries like Sierra Leone. In the area of collaboration, what is the major collaboration now between the U.S. government and that of Sierra Leone in terms of implementing programs?
So, from my perspective, the most important collaboration we have is in the area of private sector investment. I believe very firmly that for Sierra Leone to move forward as a nation, as an economy, it needs to have more domestic and foreign investment to develop the private sector. So the things that we are doing to bring private sector investors to Sierra Leone to develop the telecommunications sector, to develop the mining sector, to develop the energy sector, to build energy trade between the two countries, that, in my mind, is the most important thing that we can do. That's not foreign assistance. That's investment. That's developing the private sector. It's where we want to go in terms of the relationship. There is always going to be a role for humanitarian assistance, and the Secretary has been very clear that we will remain a global leader in providing that. But if we really want to move Sierra Leone from where it is today to where I think most Sierra Leoneans hope it will be tomorrow, it's not going to be foreign assistance that does that. It's going to be private sector investment.
What are the prospects with these foreign investments?
I think it's quite good. I have people inquiring all the time about investing here in Sierra Leone, and we have a very solid track record between the Gerald Group at Bompeh Mines, between Africell, Zoot Laboratories with the Gateway, Securiport, Caterpillar. There's a host of U.S. companies that have invested in Sierra Leone and have had very lucrative, successful investments here, have created jobs for Sierra Leoneans, have built the tax revenue for the country, in some cases have built important pieces of infrastructure for the country. So I'm very bullish about the idea that we can get more investment here.
The U.S. has been supporting so many programs in Sierra Leone. One of those key major projects is around the health sector. Has there been value for money, taking into consideration beneficiaries in this sector?
Are we satisfied? No. I think President Trump's been very clear that he is not satisfied globally with the results that we have gotten for our development programming in the health sector and in several other sectors. I think we can always do better. We can always streamline the bureaucracy, streamline the implementing mechanisms to make sure that dollars are getting where they need to go, which is the beneficiary level. And we can do a better job of holding our implementing partners accountable for meeting the targets that they are supposed to be meeting with those dollars. I wouldn't say we're doing a bad job in Sierra Leone. I'd say that we're doing probably a good job, but a good job is not good enough when we're talking about a health sector that is as underdeveloped as Sierra Leone's is. We need to be doing an excellent job. We need to be doing an outstanding job with every dollar we put into that. So part of my charge from the current administration is to make sure that we are reforming our programs so that every dollar we spend is getting absolute maximum value in that sector.
Based on metrics, what are the missing pieces in meeting this excellent job you just mentioned?
So I think part of it is about overhead. I think we spend a lot of money on overhead and administration in some of these areas, and that, of course, removes dollars from where they need to be. But if I'm looking at specific health metrics and what I would like to focus on, I think we have to bring down the maternal mortality rate even faster. We've brought it down quite a bit, but it needs to go down even further and faster. We need to continue to chip away at under 5 child mortality, specifically from malaria. Again, we brought it down, but it needs to go down further and it needs to go down faster. And then I think when we look at the global health security side, we need to do more in terms of preventing the outbreaks of zoonotic disease, preventing the outbreaks of communicable disease before they get to the human population.
Do you think some of these indicators are the reasons why Sierra Leone is not performing too well in some of these global indexes?
So it's clear to me that your Human Development Index is very much impacted by some of the indicators we've talked about. There are others that go into that on the education side, on the economic policy side, but I would say that the health sector certainly plays a key role in the HDI, which is probably the premier index of development that's used globally.
Sierra Leone's health system or the health sector has been performing poorly for quite some time now, in as much as we've had several foreign aids coming in to boost the health sector. But if you go to the hospitals, there are many challenges. What do you think the government should focus on now in terms of improving the health sector?
So I think Minister Demby has it correct when he says that we need to look at the system holistically, that for too long we've done it by disease category. So you get very good results in one disease, but you get very poor results in any number of others, and we're not moving the system as a whole forward. So I'm a huge believer in everything that we do has to build up the system, strengthen the system, make sure that when you walk into a healthcare center, whether that's the primary care facility at the village level or whether that's the hospital here in Sierra Leone, whatever your ailment, you're going to encounter well-trained staff that have the drugs, have the procedures down so that they can offer you the treatment that you need. What we have now is if you show up with, say, malaria, you probably have a fairly well-integrated system to go into because the donors are paying for it. But if you show up with tuberculosis, you might not encounter that same level of support. And I think Minister Demby is correct that we need to make sure that we're building up the system as a whole rather than individual disease categories.
Do you think if Minister Demby and other stakeholders in the health sector focus on improving some of these systems, there will be an overall accessibility in terms of proper health care in Sierra Leone?
I think it will certainly improve. I think you have a couple of key challenges. One is supply chain, making sure that you're getting the drugs where they need to go, when they need to be there. That is an issue we're helping with and one that we've made some progress on, but a great deal more needs to be done. Secondly, we need to make sure that we have trained health staff at every health unit across the country, and that means, frankly, paying salaries. We have a lot of people who work as volunteers, and believe me, I'm all for the volunteer spirit, but we need to make sure that we have a minimum basis of qualified, trained, paid, salaried health professionals around the country. And third, we have to tackle the issue of corruption. The sad reality, and we've all seen it, is that far too often people are charged for services they should not be charged for. Drugs from hospitals and health centers are being sold in the markets around the country. These practices have to stop if we're going to be able to move the system forward.
Ambassador, some of these issues, especially the one that has to do with corruption in the health sector, it is not a peculiar case for Sierra Leoneans. No. And also the issues of healthcare practitioners working as volunteers for a couple number of years without having PIN codes for them to be properly placed into the system to be receiving salaries. Are these concerns at any point meeting with the stakeholders in the health sector? Have you had a conversation around some of these concerns that has been a great challenge for the improvement of Sierra Leone's health sector?
Many times. The Health Development Partners Working Group has talked many times about this. You know, I think part of it is a question of resources. The government can only pay for what it has money to pay for. Part of it is a question of enforcement capacity. The reality is, unfortunately, the sad reality is, unfortunately, these are intertwined. And when you don't have paid health professionals who can oversee your drug stockpile, you're going to have some degree of bleed out at the community level. So we continue to focus on this, as does the government, but I think fundamentally some of this comes back to a question of tax revenues and the fact that the government has to begin to get its own fiscal house in order, raise those tax revenues, collect equitably across the country, and then prioritize the funding across sectors.
With a growing concern of corruption in some of these sectors, how would you describe systems that are in place to ensure they sustain the gains? Because if there are gains and there is a very competitive corruption in most of these sectors, then there is a concern to sustain the gains.
So I think we've seen gains fairly sustained over the last 5 years in the health sector. Could we go further and faster if we were able to address these issues? Yes, absolutely, without question. But I think right now we're at a point where we continue to see gains every year. It's a question of whether it's going to take us 5 years to get where we want to go, or 50 years, or 500 years to get to where we hope to go with the health sector. And I'm a firm advocate for minimizing that time as much as possible.
All right, Ambassador, we'll now take a short commercial break. We'll come back and continue to engage on some of these programs we are currently implementing in collaboration with the government of Sierra Leone.
Hello, Bobby.
Hey, Sadie, what's up?
How are you?
Samo, hook me up quick. Samo, someone going to forget some football pictures then for this week. I don't check all he said them all day down. But I'm help me to one. Where am I going for ginger and swagger for this week?
Ask Leo.
Ask Leo? Who is Leo?
Ask Leo, Sam. I did it. No, can't go to me, feeling. Allow me to finish my food.
Leo will help you. Open an account, check your balance, buy airtime to pop, send money. Leo will help you locate the nearest ATM point. Leo will help ease your stress by helping you get the most fascinating fixtures. Oh yes, for our football lovers. Leo will do this and many more.
Wow!
All you need to do is save Leo to your mobile phone with the number +232 79 919 919 and get to chat with Leo on WhatsApp. Go on, try it now. You can also chat with Leo on Facebook Messenger by typing UBA Chat Banking. Leo is your virtual banker who serves you wherever you are with just one click away. It is UBA. We are your #1 bank for all the right reasons. For more inquiries, call us on +232 78 200 200 or follow us on all our social media handles on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at uba.sl. We are Africa's global bank.
Orange Maxit, the super app will bring comfort and control now you on. With Orange Maxit, do all your transaction and fast and safe. Whether not for send money to family, party, or workmates, this transfer quick. You want recharge, buy top up and data in just few seconds. Get daily, weekly, and monthly package them with just one tap. Stay in control with quick balance check and instantly manage your finances well. Whether now you top up, data, or transaction history once, all day in one place. If you mistake, no worry, you fit reverse them instantly. Visit the marketplace now Maxit and buy the latest in them, tickets to the biggest events them, and even play games. All this day now you on. Do all your transaction them easy. Pay merchants, pay bills, transfer money from bank to wallets, and cash out all now one app with safe. Easy. Search Maxit now Google Play and iOS App Store. Download, install, and then register with your number and password. Open Maxit and see how it has simplify your life. Download Maxit today and get comfort now your fingertips.
Orange.
All right, welcome back. It's still the Breakfast Show on Liberty Online Television, and we still get Ambassador Hunt in the studio this morning with a talk about the Salon bilateral relationship where the country gets with the U.S. donor-funded projects, program them where they don't fund and don't they clear some rumors and where they don't go around. And we give them more opportunity for ask more questions to the ambassador. So we read more messages so the ambassador will respond, especially for specific concerns them where people engage. We go take another rounds of questions from the viewers them so that the ambassador will reply. This one what they watch now the YouTube channel. Suleiman Kamara they ask say, why haven't I received another interview after UC said my case was returned to the NYC in October 2023? I have been trying to contact someone who can give me answers, but no one has reached out to me.
Ibrahim Lansana is asking, is the MCC fund has any relation with the USAID Secretariat?
All right, more messages. This one from Suleiman Kamara on the YouTube channel. It says, how long after a denial can someone reapply for spousal visa, and will the mistakes that was made still deny me?
This one says, Mr. Ambassador, what is the U.S. government stance on corrupt politicians in Sierra Leone that own properties in the United States?
Abdullah Ukule is asking, Ambassador Hunt deserves our deepest appreciation for his timeless work and dedication to promoting and enhancing democracy in Sierra Leone. However, in spite of the considerable assistance provided by the development partners, including the USA, certain individual politicians persist in subverting our democratic process.
All right, so look at a few more messages, then we'll come back to Ambassador Hunt for his response. This one is saying, Ambassador Hunt, okay, I think we've took that one.
Abdul Ramskes says, good morning, Liberty TV. Please ask Ambassador Hunt if USAID localizing global health service projects will continue since President Trump freezes the funds that have affected other sub-Saharan countries.
This one is saying Ambassador David Hunt deserves our deepest appreciation for his fearless work and dedication to promoting and enhancing democracy in Sierra Leone. However, in spite of the considerable assistance provided by development partners, including the USA, certain individual politicians persist in subverting our democratic processes.
All right, this one, then we come to the ambassador. Ibrahim Lansana is saying, what about the US citizens who overstay visas in Sierra Leone? And what do you think the government of Sierra Leone will do with this category of US citizens?
This last one from me for now is saying, Mr. Hunt, our government is always good at manipulation of processes since the law favors them. There should be more pressure on government to implement the agreement because it's almost a year and they are still getting ready to start when they should have completed now. Mr. Conner's term is coming to an end and the president will use the current laws to appoint his successor, which is key to transparent elections. All right, Mr. Hunt?
So let me take the visa ones first. I can't speak to individual cases without having the full background, so there's no way I can possibly answer why someone has not heard back from the NVC. What I will say is that the National Visa Center has its own emails and phone numbers that are available online at state.gov that folks can look up. And if the issue is with the National Visa Center and whether or not you have submitted your paperwork to them, you need to contact the National Visa Center. Contacting the embassy won't help you because we don't have access to those cases until they are fully completed at the NVC and those papers are transferred to us. In terms of when you can reapply for a visa, Immigrant visas and non-immigrant visas are very different, so I don't know which the inquirer was talking about. But if it is a non-immigrant visa, you may reapply at any time, but the outcome is unlikely to be different unless your circumstances have changed. So if you are applying the day after you were refused, you are probably wasting your money, and you are probably preventing other Sierra Leoneans from getting those interview slots. You need to come to the embassy once your circumstances in Sierra Leone have changed. So for example, you get a new job, you get married and your spouse is not traveling with you, you buy a house, you suddenly have more money in your bank account. Those are the sorts of things that might alter the outcome. The fact that, gee, I really want to go to the United States, so I'm going to reapply the day after I was refused a non-immigrant visa, probably won't help you. Immigrant visas are a little bit different. Those are document-based. So if you were refused because you didn't have your birth certificate, or you didn't have your marriage certificate, or you were unable to prove your relationship with the individual who was petitioning for you, once you have whatever documents were missing, then you should reapply, and your case will be most likely adjudicated in a different way, so long as you provide the documents that the consular officer requested. Now, if your petition was denied because of fraud, because you lied, because you submitted a fake document, that's an entirely different question. And that gets into visa ineligibilities that are much more difficult to overcome. So it really depends on the case, but those are the general guidelines. The Millennium Challenge Corporation is not part of the U.S. Agency for International Development. It is an independent U.S. government agency with its own board of directors, so the restructuring of USAID, however that ultimately comes out, does not impact the Millennium Challenge Corporation. It is a completely separate entity with its own funding lines in our budget, its own operating statutes, its own board of directors. Corruption is a serious problem at all levels. The U.S. government takes that very seriously. We have a number of laws in the United States that can be used to prosecute individuals who attempt to conceal their assets in the United States. I won't go into law enforcement matters because that is really for our Department of Justice to talk about, but those laws do exist, and at times they are used. I can think of several cases where prominent foreign politicians have been charged and convicted in the United States for attempting to conceal assets gained through corruption there, so it can be done. As far as the whole question of where we are in the tripartite process, is it far enough? Look, this is complex legislation. I would have been very uncomfortable if the government had simply rushed through everything that the committee recommended. I think you need time for deliberation, for debate, to consult with Sierra Leoneans. It needs to go through the parliamentary process. Your representatives need to have a voice. The people need to have a voice in this whole process. So I think the fact that we are doing it in a deliberative fashion, that the government is out there consulting, that there are working groups that have been set up to look at these things, that it will go through a parliamentary process. Yes, it will be slower, but it needs to go there. Now, we do have a July 29th deadline with the retirement of the Chief Election Commissioner. That is a real deadline. That is one that we, the opposition, the government, the steering committee, are fully aware of and are working very hard to make sure that the legislation gets introduced into Parliament in sufficient time to allow for that deliberative parliamentary process, but also to have it adopted and in place prior to the retirement of the Chief Election Commissioner. You know, people talk about pressure all the time and what the international community should do to pressure your politicians. The reality is your politicians are always going to listen to you, long before they listen to me, long before they listen to any other foreign diplomat. They are most acutely impacted by the voters of Sierra Leone. They know that you all are ultimately the ones that are going to determine whether they go back into office or don't. So for those who are concerned about the need for more pressure on politicians, by all means, call your representatives, talk to them, pressure them, get your communities involved around this issue, work with NGOs, work with the media, keep this at the forefront of the debate. It should be there. This is important to the country, but people in Sierra Leone are the ones who ultimately are going to drive their politicians to do what they have committed to do or not.
Ambassador Hunt, the pace at which the committee is going with now in terms of looking at these critical recommendations from the tripartite committee, is it visible for them to complete their job, take it to Parliament, and have a legislation that will enhance transparency of the next general election, which is supposed to hold in 2028?
Yes. The committee's charted out a work plan, as has the government, that uses the 2028 election and some interim markers like the retirement of the chief election commissioner as action-forcing events. So they know at what point certain pieces of legislation have to go forward to the Parliament, and they are working to meet those deadlines. And I'm fairly confident, based upon my discussions with committee members, with the Attorney General's office, that we can fairly easily still meet those deadlines and allow for the deliberative process that Parliament's entitled to.
With some of these recommendations that are in the reports of the tripartite committee, are you sure that if all of these recommendations being given a critical look and implemented, the issues of the 2023 election, Sierra Leonean will not see a repeat of it coming to the next elections, 2028?
So I think asking does Ambassador Hunt believe this is probably the wrong question.
Because
the
you've
question
been
is,
part of this process. You've been at the forefront of it.
Yeah.
You've provided technical support, financial support, and some of these recommendations, you've seen them.
Yeah.
And you know what they will help in terms of transparency.
Yeah. So for what I base my assessment on is not my personal bias or background. It's what the international experts who have spent their lives looking at comparative election systems tell me. And the clear message from experts from the United States, from Germany, from the United Nations, is that the recommendations from the tripartite committee would fundamentally change the electoral landscape in Sierra Leone and would prevent the problems that you saw in not just the 2023 elections, but in all of your elections going back to the first ones that were held after the end of the Civil War. So this has been internationally validated. I think it was a very smart idea by the tripartite committee to bring in these experts to look at it. So we are quite confident that what we have is solid legislation that will fundamentally change the rules of the game and give you an electoral system in which Sierra Leoneans can have credibility.
Ambassador, since the coming of the Trump administration in Sierra Leone here locally, there has been this huge interest around his immigration policies and also this growing concern with those that have overstayed in the U.S. Has that in any way, or will it in any way affect the diversity visa?
So the visa lottery, or the diversity visa program, is enshrined in law by the Congress. So to change that program would require congressional legislation. As of right now, I'm not aware of any legislation that's been introduced in our Congress to change that particular program.
So it's ongoing.
So the cycle that was run last year, those visas are in process and will continue to be issued to those who were qualified up until the end of our fiscal year, which is September 30th.
So the overstay issue does not affect the DV?
So the DV is not directly impacted by the overstay issue. The overstay issue really impacts non-immigrant visa processing as opposed to immigrant visa processing. Because immigrant visas, when we issue them, the intent is you're going to live in the United States. So there's no overstay possible there. Once you have an immigrant visa, so long as you don't violate the U.S. law in other ways, you are expected to move and stay indefinitely in the United States.
About the number of people that you give the visas to?
No, diversity visas, again, immigrant visas, we're not looking at the question of will you overstay, because you're The intent is for you to be there indefinitely.
What about the exchange programs? Are they still intact?
So U.S. government exchange programs are intact. We still continue to send people on exchange programs. We have every intention of continuing to send people on exchange programs.
Let's look at the negotiations between that of the government and the opposition, which you've played a center role in all of these. And it's not news that immediately after the 2023 elections, Sierra Leoneans have gone through lots of tensions, political tensions in the country, but you've been one of the moral guarantor that has stood with Sierra Leoneans, negotiating with both parties to ensure a peaceful transition and a coexistence. Are you still committed in all of these negotiations to ensure that Sierra Leoneans continue to live in peace and giving strength to Sierra Leone's democracy?
Yeah, absolutely. We remain fully committed to working with the government and the opposition to ensure the full implementation of the Agreement for National Unity and the tripartite process. I should make it very clear, as I have in other places, the United States is not one of the listed moral guarantors of the agreement. We have been a friend, we have been a partner, we have helped with the negotiations, we've provided technical support to them, but the moral guarantors are actually enumerated within the agreement, and it's mostly international organizations or domestic civil society groups. The decision was made not to list the bilaterals as moral guarantors for a number of reasons, but we continue to be engaged very actively in the process.
How about collaboration? Because there are several programs you are working on now with that of the Sierra Leone government in terms of working amicably to ensure that these programs are being implemented and the people of Sierra Leone, who are the beneficiary, continue to enjoy the support coming from the people of the United States.
So we are going to do everything we can to, as the Secretary says, remain a global leader in humanitarian assistance. It will mean changes to some programs. It will mean that there are certain areas like family planning and climate change that we are not going to be engaged in going forward. But those programs that we decide we are going to continue, or that we have already decided we're going to continue, particularly in the health sector, we will do everything we can to make sure, as President Trump has charged us, that every dollar that's spent is being spent efficiently, is being spent effectively, and is getting the maximum benefit we can for its expenditure.
Aside the health sector, there is another sector that is currently facing hard time in Sierra Leone, which is the energy sector. I'm sure you're aware of the current challenges the energy sector is going through, and there's been these rumors that the World Bank is putting pressure on government to discontinue their agreements with the car power ship, and now Freetown is suffering from total outage of power. Any support on the energy sector to help resolve some of these issues?
So there are things that foreign assistance is most appropriate to do, and there are things that the private sector is most appropriate to do. In the case of power generation, the real question is a private sector one. It's making sure that we have companies that come in to build power generation, both for the emergency period and for the long term here in Sierra Leone. And the United States is fully committed to working with the Ministry of Energy to identify the best possible private sector solutions, both for the emergency power, which is what the car power ship currently provides, and for the longer term. As you know, we're heavily involved in the Nant Energy project through our Development Finance Corporation. So we are very much working to help the government answer the question, when the car power ship contract comes to an end in June, how do we bring in the most cost-effective, most technically appropriate power generator from the international community? Maybe that means renewing car power ship. Maybe that means purchasing through the West African power pool. Maybe that means bringing in another private sector operator. Those are all options that should be on the table and should be considered. We clearly don't want any break in the generation capacity, but there are short-term operators who could come in very quickly to pick up where car power ship may leave off. It's a question for the government, it's a question for the Ministry of Energy, but but it's something that we are certainly committed to helping them find a private sector partner or find the right mix of private sector partners to ensure that power continues here.
Earlier we talked about corruption in the health sector, and the same thing is happening in the energy sector. As it stands now, EDSA cannot pay for the energy, and people are paying money to EDSA to get their top up for their meter and all of that. There's been a whole lot of allegations on the heads of EDSA about corruption. The last time we hosted the deputy minister here, Edmond Nuni, he said they've started an investigation to look at some of these issues. So with private partner coming into the energy sector, do you think that would be a solution to ending the massive corruption that is currently happening in EDSA?
So I think that we have to tackle the whole question of EDSA's ability to pay its bills. If we do not set up what's called the independent collection account, which means that the funds that flow to EDSA flow into a single account that is then used to pay, first and foremost, the private sector that generates the power, then we're not going to be able to have any private sector solution, Car Power, Western Power Project, or anybody, Western Power Pool, or anybody else coming in. People are not going to touch it if we don't get that independent collection account set up and moving forward. And that will largely deal with the whole question of corruption once the money arrives at EDSA. The other reality is we have to see those who are consuming energy paying their bills. There are still far too many EDSA customers who do not pay their power bill on anything like a regular basis. Some do, and that's wonderful, but the reality is many do not. And we have to tackle that. People have to recognize, institutions have to recognize, businesses have to recognize that if they don't pay their power bills for what they receive from EDSA, there's not going to be a Car Power ship or a West African power pool or a private sector generator coming in to save the country. We have to deal with that fundamental question. At the same time, we deal with the issue of the independent collection account and the broader questions of finding appropriate generators.
So, Ambassador, based on all what we've discussed here this morning, if we are to guard the bilateral relation with Sierra Leone and that of the United States, what would you say needs to be done to ensure that democratic principles are adhered to, especially from the government in Sierra Leone?
So from my perspective, I think the most important thing that we can do is really twofold. One, we need to build up the private sector. It is a truism globally that when you have a middle class, that middle class is much more likely to put pressure on governments, demand their rights, move the country forward in a positive direction on the democracy side. The two are inextricably intertwined. So when I say that President Trump is committed to moving forward the commercial relationship, the investment relationship, the trade relationship, that also means it's going to move forward the democratic relationship. The second thing I think that that Sierra Leoneans need to focus on is how they put pressure on their politicians. External pressure is fine, but external pressure is never going to have the same impact as domestic pressure. The work that you do as an independent media outlet, the work that civil society groups do in calling the government to account, the work that individual citizens do, just in going to community meetings, making their concerns known at the district level, or engaging their member of parliament to insist that certain pieces of legislation go through, that's really where change gets driven in a society. So if people are concerned about making sure Sierra Leone's democracy continues to evolve, I would encourage them to get engaged. That's how you really move a country forward.
You will only get these engagements you just made mention of if the space is open and free. How are you going to continue talking to governments to ensure that they open up the space for civic engagements, they open up the space for free press, they open up the space for civil society organization to have engagement, to have fair criticism on their shortcomings.
Yeah. So there is certainly a demand side to this equation where we continue to give government models that it may wish to consider adopting, where we use our diplomatic engagement to encourage them to adhere to their global commitments as a signatory to the Universal Declaration on Human Rights, the International Convention on Civil and Political Rights. But I will say, oftentimes, again, it comes down not to the government saying, yes, everyone please come talk to us, but people beating on the door and saying, we insist that we are entitled to these rights, we insist that they be respected, we insist you give us the space to be able to engage you. Now, I think you're blessed here in Sierra Leone in that you have a government that, in comparison to many in Africa, actually does care about public feedback. It actually is relatively accessible and approachable, certainly more so than in many countries where I've worked. So I think in some ways you're knocking on an open door when you ask for that. Will there be tussles? Will there be disagreements? Of course there will be. That's the nature of democracy. We have that in our own country where people disagree with steps the administration takes. And it's that continuous dialogue that really moves things forward. And I think you're fortunate here in Sierra Leone to have that opportunity where you can engage politicians, where you can engage both government and opposition, and where they are now engaging one another increasingly in the national interest.
All right, many thanks, Ambassador Hunt. It's lovely having you here this morning. Hopefully, all. You want to say something?
Yeah, I just want to say, Ambassador has been here for over a year. You don't learn any Creole?
I can understand Creole. I do not attempt to speak Creole, as I would only embarrass myself and my country by doing so.
You should at least pick some few words that you take back home at the end of your tenure.
Of course.
Consider doing that, please.
Well, thank you very much.
Right. It's lovely having you here this morning. The conversation has been really, really great. And I'm sure we've been able to address all of these myths and disinformation out there, especially on the area of this visa ban on Sierra Leoneans. Thank you for coming to our studios this morning, Ambassador.
Thank you very much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
All right. Well, now they end the breakfast show for today's edition. We'll be to talk to the U.S. Ambassador to Salon, where Ambassador Bryan Hunt will be to address plenty issues that we get for do with the bilateral relationship between the U.S. government and that of Sierra Leone. Princess Pierce now produced this edition of the breakfast show. Musa Saokoma, Dennis Kamara, and Samuel Thomas now the technician there will give technical support to the production team. Mina Khadija Bangwa, they say continue for Watch Liberty TV, as this is not the only digital news agency who say they get correct information or different things that would happen at the country. So till meet back, have a blessed day.
All right, and Mabel Kabadi, so get a good day and continue for Watch Liberty Online Television, as throughout the day we get different contents where we post now with different platforms. Till we meet again, have a good week and goodbye.
City, then clean, all clean city develop.
This is Yvonne Akisoya, Mayor of Freetown, and today I want to talk to Freetonians about sanitation. We objective, transform Freetown, transforming lives. We not go able to achieve them if we all not join hands. Freetown City Council get role, but every Freetonian also get responsibility. Let me start first with the fact say FCC with the sweep 110 major streets every single morning from Monday to Saturday. But when we don't sweep the streets, if Freetonians then come and they continue for heap dirty in the street, in order to make the place look fine. Now make we get them litter bins them. The yellow bins we wanna go see around. So in the waka, you drink from your water bottle, your water plastic, you eat your packets on tin, not even a ground where you done. make sure say you put on one of them bins then they. That litter bin they. In order for you host dirty. You know mean say if you pack you host dirty, you can pin her next to the bins them. Not to the idea that. Not give you host dirty to them one way the Allah say clean salon, clean salon. No say that dirty way they collect now you host. In order for Karango, now the one of the two official sites. In order Karango Kisi Bompeh, in order Karango Kington Bompeh. It turns so it left on the ground. And now we council get a problem, but you said get a problem. Because now front somebody else in Domot, your own dirty don't end up. So wait you for do with you host dirty. We get the one then a council when we don't certify. Say then approved waste providers. Then they on tricycles, some of them they a vehicle. You will get host, you will get business, you in a hospital, institution. Everybody for make sure say their waste collected by an approved FCC waste collector. We get the tricycle groups, we get the companies. So you go see them around. We engage with them on a regular basis. And wait till we go do now as we come into this new year. Now for make sure say FCC stand behind them for FU, for no outside and day, and for let themselves go to you so that we no go get that gap. When you eat dirty in a gutter, it end up na Lumley Beach, Toke Beach. All the tourism ambition where we get for the city, we lost that potential there. FCC, they spend boku money on dirty business. The fuel, the labor, the vehicle maintenance, the spare parts, the night operations, the illegal dump site clearing where we get for the do every now and then. All that boku money. I'm not going to say we're not going to spend anything, but we're going to reduce some. If Fritonians then do the right thing. Because we're not going to get for go clear illegal dump sites. We're not going to get for sweep as many streets and spend as long. So if we reduce that money we spend now on dirty business, we go able to put some on development. We all want for improving municipal schools. We want improving markets them. We want for let we see new developments at the city. That money we use for dirty business. You and while we all make up we mind. Pay